What is up, True Crime World? You're listening to Luminol on the Wall. I'm Becky.
And I'm Bevy. And today's case is about two young women who go missing that lead detectives on the path to finding the Cape Cod vampire/cannibal serial killer. This is the case of Patricia Walsh and Marianne Wysocki. Listeners' discretion is advised.
Hey there to all our Lotto family.
Hey,
How's it going, Bev?
it's good, Becky.
Good.
Oh my gosh, hello to you, sister. So today I have a confession
Yes, she does.
because
She lied to everyone.
Hold your horsies, Becky. Just hold your horsies, gal. Now, I just was mistaken in our last podcast where we were talking about a Netflix series that Becky and I had watched, and I called it Lockdown, and it is in fact called Unlocked. So if you were just going on Netflix, searching, being like, Luminol on the Wall told me to watch this fucking shit, and you couldn't find it, there's a reason.
Because Bev was wrong.
Because I was mistaken.
Trying to make it sound like Sugar Cody.
Me?
Yeah, mistaken.
Yeah, I didn't like how harsh wrong sounded. Okay? That sounded evil. I was like, wow, Becky's really taking her opportunity to take her shots. See how it is?
Bev's been sassy all night. I take one shot.
No, it's been plenty. You know it.
Of your sass?
No,
Yes.
I mean your shots. Shot. Becky's getting angry. Shot.
What?
Shot. I'm knowing her. Oh, crazy. Shot. Becky's gonna lose her shit. Shot. This is what she's been dealing with. It's been a problem.
And I'm taking shots. Sure.
Anyways, I don't know what's got me all ramped up, but something has. And either way, I was mistaken on our last podcast. So I thought I would just clear the air with y'all and give you the opportunity to actually watch that series because it was
interesting.
interesting.
That's right.
So let's get into the case for today because it's going to be
A banger.
a banger. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of the Cape Cod vampire,
/ the Cape Cod cannibal.
but if you haven't, we're going to get into it.
So listen up.
All right, so today's case takes place in Provincetown, Massachusetts. And in the 1950s, Provincetown was predominantly a small, close-knit fishing community. But in the mid to late 60s, it more so became an artistic hub that attracted hippies and artistic individuals. And the local community seemed to embrace this new and alternative lifestyle. However, this newfound lifestyle brought about a lot of eccentric behavior, such as drug use, some sex, and this type of behavior became pretty common in Provincetown. It was said that a lot of the locals and people in Provincetown smoked weed and dabbled in other drugs.
Sounds like Woodstock, only for a city.
Town. Yeah.
Permanently.
Right?
Yeah. Just
And
no
we all know
muddy
how that
mess.
ended. Wah, wah, wah. If you haven't watched Woodstock, go watch it on Netflix. Is that what it's called? I don't know.
Oh, Bevy, you were thinking of the more modern Woodstock.
Oh, motherfucking bitch. God damn it.
So you know the original
Yes,
Woodstock?
the hippies, which makes more sense to what you were saying. But all I thought was that, you know, that new one?
Yeah.
Is it Woodstock still?
Yeah, it was in 94, Woodstock 94 or
Mhm.
something? That's what Bev's thinking
With
of.
corn and fucking all the crazy fucking metal heads. Ah! That fucking burned that shit down.
It's all about the he said, she said bullshit.
Exactly. Kid Rock, you know?
That's not Kid Rock, just so you know.
I know, but like
Okay.
that's another artist that was there in the new Woodstock of 94.
Yeah, and it was a mad riot.
Mad Riot.
Just to be clear, Bev, what happened in the original Woodstock was like a muddy mess. There wasn't toilets. People were like, there were some deaths because of like drugs. There wasn't enough water. The hygiene was terrible. It was just poorly planned.
That was the one in 94.
No, they were both like that.
Both of them were like that? I thought the one
They
earlier
both
in
were
the
very
60s
tragic.
I don't remember that being the case, Becky.
You didn't even remember the original Woodstock, Bev.
No, I did. That after you mentioned it. But really? Okay, well, either way, it does seem a little bit like that.
Woodstocky.
Woodstocky. And in this town, the drugs became so prevalent that some of the locals started noticing some new business opportunities to partake in. And it just so happened that this area along the coast was also an awesome climate for growing marijuana. So you mix the two and two together, and you have a booming marijuana business.
Cashola.
And one man in the town who realized that this was a good opportunity was named Tony Costa. Now, Tony's parents grew up in Provincetown, but they had eventually left because his father was in the Navy. And as we know, the Navy requires traveling. And so Tony was actually born in Cambridge and grew up near Boston, Massachusetts. All I think of when I say that is massive two shits. Like, come on now. It's like, it almost says it coming out of your mouth. You say Massachusetts and all you hear is massive two shits.
It's a really unfortunate name because, like, if you do, you know, slur your words a little bit, it does come out quite like that.
Totally.
You're like, I'm so sorry.
Massachusetts. Oh, shoot.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So anyways, when he was a young boy, his father actually died in a drowning accident, which is very unfortunate. And life was hard for the Costa family. But even though they fell on those hard times, they were able to get through it the best that they could. However, when Tony became a teenager, he did show some deviant behavior that did somewhat concern his mother. He would bring girls home, and while hanging out in his room, he would attempt to suffocate them with pillows. Now, in an even more concerning event, Tony had been caught by his mother with a neighbor's daughter who he had tied up with a rope in their home. And keep in mind, he was quite young at this time. And unfortunately, no one seemed to do anything about it. I'm sure people were mortified, his mother specifically, and was like, you just don't do that. But like maybe didn't understand at that time the implication that his behavior might have.
Yeah, so it was just swept under the rug.
Yeah, and not long after this event in 1961, Tony's behavior ramped up. And when he was just 17, he broke into a home and entered a 14-year-old girl's room. The girl woke to Tony hovering over her. She screamed, and then Tony fled the house.
Yeah, he's like, get the hell out of there.
Yeah, he didn't expect her to wake up, right? So just a mere 3 days later, Tony was arrested because he had returned to the 14-year-old's home and attempted to drag her down the stairs of the building that she lived in. Luckily, neighbors broke up this tussle between the pair and restrained Tony, and then were able to wait for the police, hence him getting arrested. And then he was charged and convicted of burglary and assault.
Man, I wonder what he would have done to that girl if the neighbors hadn't intervened.
I wonder too. So for this crime, Tony got a 1-year suspended sentence and 3 years of probation. Now, we've talked about a suspended sentence previously, and do you want to remind everyone what a suspended sentence is, Becky?
Yeah, it's basically like you're convicted and sentenced, but you don't actually serve any time.
Yeah, because you're a minor, right?
Yeah.
They want to prevent people from going into the system. So they do a 1-year suspended sentence. So you are convicted of it, but they want to give you the benefit of the doubt and hope that you can correct your behavior and not get put into the system.
Exactly. Just a little slap on the wrist.
Exactly. Which I have to say, with the behavior that he has shown in entering someone's home and attempting to like abduct a 14-year-old child, I think that's a little bit
more severe
for that type of sentence, to be quite frank.
Yeah, like I'm thinking like petty theft.
Yeah, like a suspended sentence for that, sure. But this is like a violation of someone's home and of their person. And it's with a freaking minor. So
it's violent.
It's violent, truly. You can only assume that his intentions for this young girl are
bad.
Very bad. So the judge tells Tony to try and get out of the area, lay low, and to make better choices. And at this point, Tony's family then moves back to Provincetown. So to begin on Tony's path to the straight and narrow, they enroll him in high school, and he is now a senior at this point. But Tony had issues kind of adapting into the town. He was not really accepted by the locals, even though his parents were originally from Provincetown, mostly because Tony was a loner. He mostly kept to himself. He was diagnosed as a schizoid personality type, which makes it hard for him to build relationships with people and to show like a broad range of emotions. So he struggled making genuine and empathetic relationships with his family and his peers and just the locals in general.
So he came by his like loner mentality quite naturally.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think people just kind of weren't attracted to that, right? Like if you keep to yourself, people kind of get weirded out by it,
They stay away from you as well.
Yeah. And not only that, but he did creep out a lot of the other teens, partially because he had some unusual interests, one of which was taxidermy, which is basically like stuffing animals, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think people were kind of put off by that as well.
It's not a hobby you see people have every day.
Yeah, I don't think it's not like unusual. I mean, I've seen a lot of homes have like a deer up on the wall or what have you, right? Like it's not like it's totally far-fetched. However, for a youth,
that being a hobby,
it was odd. And Tony would pick up roadkill to engage in this hobby of his. In one instance, while attempting to socialize, he killed a raccoon so that he could stuff it.
Mm.
So as you can see, he is putting people off by his interests, and just like his socialization skills are
a little odd.
Off.
You know who this reminds me of, Bev?
Ted Bundy. No. I didn't mean to say Ted Bundy. Let me say the name. Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, Bevy.
Yes, I know.
Although he didn't do taxidermy, but he
had a fascination with like dead animals, right?
Yeah, and him and his dad would go get the roadkill, stuff like that. But he also had a hard time socializing and was just a little odd to everyone. And,
a little bit of a loner.
And off-putting, right?
Right, exactly.
Interesting.
It is interesting to see that
commonality.
Exactly. Now, on top of his socialization attempts and his unusual interests, the locals also noticed some of their pet cats going missing, and they assumed that it was Tony.
Oh, that's a pretty good assumption, I guess.
Yeah, I would think so. So, despite him being creepy, he was actually very intelligent, and he was arrogant about it. He believed he was smarter than most people that were around him, which is a very, not a desirable quality, I have to say.
No, it's not. We've all met people who are like that, and although they can be nice and friendly, a lot of times they want to be right, and they'll argue their points, and they make you feel a little less than.
Right.
At times, right?
Yeah, so it's just like he's kind of hitting all the check marks for just being
not the greatest qualities.
Yeah, creepy, a little rapey,
arrogant,
a little killy,
a little taxidermy.
So yeah, he's just I can see why the locals were having a hard time accepting this person.
Oh, for sure.
However, even though Tony did creep people out a lot, he did have his amazingly good looks to fall back on, and he was able to draw in the ladies as a result. He was actually a great conversationalist when he wanted to be, and because of this and his looks, women did find him initially quite charming, especially younger women and teens. Now, it was also said that Tony also preferred dealing with younger people and women himself because they were impressionable and easier to control.
Yes, the age and power dynamic.
Right. That is so often talked about in our podcasts, right?
Mm-hmm.
People really take advantage of that, and Tony was no different. He sought out that age group so much so that shortly after moving to Provincetown, he met and started dating a 13-year-old girl. And by the time she turned 14, she married 20-year-old Tony. Now, everyone around town found the age thing pretty weird.
Yeah, it was said that he actually would drive her to and from school, and it just didn't sit right with anyone, that age gap.
She would be in grade 8 when she's 14, right?
Yeah.
And she's married to a 20-year-old, so he's out of school at this point. That is odd.
It's wrong.
Yeah.
And we think of a 6-year age gap as adults, Jamie's 6 years older than me, 6 years older than me. And it's we're the same age, in our 30s, it's same.
Yeah, but at that time, right, when a young girl has
Teenager
literally only lived 14 years of her life, it's weird.
It's weird no matter which way you slice it.
And nowadays, I can't speak for in like the 60s, but nowadays that is statutory rape. Like,
yes, very frowned upon.
It's very frowned upon.
Very.
So either way, the couple is married and they go on to have 2 children together. Tony becomes a carpenter / handyman. But by the time that Tony was 24, he started to become quite dependent on drugs. And as his drug use ramped up, he and his wife separated. After their separation, they did have a lot of issues because Tony was not paying child support, and he even was jailed as a result. Tony was far from the straight and narrow path that his mother had hoped for him in moving to Provincetown. Not only was he separated from his wife and jailed due to some poor choices, he became known around town as a male trollop, which is basically just a man who has multiple sexual partners. So as Tony is kind of trolloping around town, Provincetown is shook when 2 women are reported as missing in January of 1969. The women's names were Patricia, or Pat, Walsh, and Mary Ann Wasaki. They were from Rhode Island, and both had gone on an impromptu weekend getaway to Provincetown. The 2 women were good friends, and while in Provincetown, they rented a room in a guest / boarding house. And when they both didn't show up for work, their parents became concerned and reported them missing. The families pleaded with detectives to look into their disappearance. They had said that this was out of the ordinary for both women. And police decide to do just that. They look into the missing women. They learn that some locals had seen the 2 women with none other than Tony Costa. When police heard this little bit of information, they became alarmed because about 9 months prior to these women going missing, a woman by the name of Sydney Monzon had gone missing and had been seen with Tony beforehand as well. But because of her free-spirited, eclectic ways and no real proof of foul play, the detectives had just assumed that she had left town to travel the world or something.
Yeah, I mean, in Provincetown, that was really common because it's like hippies traveling through, seeing the world, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's part of the culture in the town in the 60s.
Exactly.
So it does make sense. But of course, now that we have 2 more women that have gone missing and both last seen with Tony, the ears of the detectives perk up.
Yeah.
And when they go to speak with Tony, they learn he too was renting a room in the same boarding house as Pat and Mary Ann.
Opportunity.
Dun, dun, dun. And by the time police get there, to the boarding house that is, Tony had already checked out.
Well, of course he has.
How convenient. And unfortunately, no one had seen him around town since. Now, when the detectives begin asking around, they speak to the landlady of the guest home, and she did have some relevant information that she wanted to pass on to the detectives. She had said that the day after that these girls had arrived at the guest home, she noticed a note on their door from Tony, and it said, "Could you give me a ride to Truro early in the morning?" And the following day, she had found another note on the girl's door that was addressed to her saying, "We are checking out. Thank you for your many kindnesses, Mary Ann and Pat." And their belongings were gone. Now, the last thing that the landlady told the detectives was that the paper used in both of those notes were the same.
Which I could imagine is a little concerning because it obviously came from the same source.
Right.
And how can the girls have the same source as Tony? They can't.
Well, unless they borrowed a piece of paper from him. Like, that's possible.
That is.
But it is a little weird, and I'm sure the police were, like, put that in their back pocket for a later date. Like, interesting piece of information.
Mm-hmm.
So after speaking to the landlady, they continue on with their investigation, and they decide to look inside of Tony's room. And what they find is a bunch of rope that had deep red stains on it. And after they find this rope, detectives got a lead from the neighboring town of Truro, no less. Pat's Volkswagen was found behind Pine Grove Cemetery, just off of Cemetery Road.
Behind a cemetery? Like, could that be any more creepy?
Yeah, it's very ominous.
Ugh.
Now, the lead that the detectives had received came from the cemetery workers themselves. They had ran a signal 10 on the car to see if it was reported stolen, but it wasn't. So this was a little bit suspicious considering that the area the car was found in was very remote. So why was this car found in such a remote area? If it wasn't stolen, where are the owners of this vehicle?
Well, exactly. That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what detectives have to go figure out. So the detectives have to go immediately search and look at this car. But what's interesting is that they didn't find anything that was too concerning about it. But throughout their investigation, they did find some information with regards to the car and the location, and that was that Tony had been seen driving toward Truro in the same area with none other than Pat and Marianne. What was even more, Beck, is that they had found out that Tony had a pot farm in that same area. So it's kind of making this connection between the girls and Tony and kind of confirming the note a little bit, right? And they're putting these pieces together and it's making a little bit of sense. However, what was really getting the detectives and people in the investigation was that the two girls had missed an appointment that afternoon in Provincetown.
Right. So they know that if they had gone to Truro with Tony, whether, he did something or something bad happened to them, they did not make it back to Provincetown for that appointment.
Right. So, yeah, it could be innocent, but it also could be something a little bit more sinister. But when people make an appointment and then don't show up for it, I mean,
they were only there the weekend.
Yeah. So it does seem a little bit weird. Like now the question's like, why didn't you just show up to your appointment? And then on top of the fact that like they're missing and like weird shit has been found in Tony's apartment, it's kind of like, like now missing the appointment doesn't seem like just a regular old occurrence. Like someone got caught up doing something else. It seems scary. Now, because at this point, the cops don't really have any information that is suggesting foul play or that anything really suspicious took place other than probably their suspicions, they leave the car for the day and they decide that they will go back the following day to look at it one more time. But when they go back, the car is missing.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, like, what just happened? Are the girls alive? Like, this is Pat's car. Did she come back to it and move it? Like, were they runaways? Like, I'm sure there's
were
a lot of
hiking?
Yeah, like just a lot of information is going on and probably giving the officers a lot of questions to answer. And that answer would come soon enough when detectives have a witness that comes forward that says that they have seen Tony Costa driving a Volkswagen in Boston.
Alone.
Girls non-present. Not there. And it was said that Tony had spoken to the local garage and was given a quote to paint said Volkswagen. And after hearing all of this information and putting all of the tidbits of information that they've gathered together, the cops become a little bit more suspicious of the area that the Volkswagen was found in because the question still remains, why was that vehicle there completely unattended, right? So in February of 1969, a search was conducted in the woodland area behind the Truro Cemetery. The detectives used National Park rangers, state and local police, dogs, and planes to search the area.
It was heavy duty.
It was heavy duty, but they were serious. And luckily, not long into their search, and only about 10 feet off the road from where the Volkswagen was, a searcher noticed an indentation on the ground. It looked to be about a foot deep.
Oh, that's a serious indentation, too.
That is, hey?
It's not just like, oh, did like maybe a dog dig here? It's like,
a foot
what
deep.
is buried there?
Yeah, no kidding. An indentation on the ground that's pretty deep? Yeah, I'm thinking that right now, too. So, of course, detectives also think, potentially a body. I don't know if they think that, but I'm sure they're like, this is suspicious enough that we need to unearth this area.
Yes.
And they start digging. And they see a green duffel bag. And underneath it, they found a young woman. She had been cut up into 8 pieces. All of her organs, including her sexual organs, had been removed. But this woman could not be identified as any of the missing women that the detectives were aware of. She wasn't Sydney Monzon, she wasn't Patricia Walsh, and she definitely wasn't Marianne Wasaki. So who was she?
A fourth woman.
A fourth woman. And the cops quickly were able to identify her as Susan Perry, who was 19 years old from Provincetown. And she was a missing person as of September of 1968. So a little, like about a year earlier. So yes, Becky, she was a fourth woman that had been missing in the exact same area.
My God, how many more bodies are they going to find, hey?
Well, don't you worry, Becky, because we will get into it. But first, I want to tell you about what the detectives found out about Susan Perry. And what that was is that at the time of her disappearance, she and Tony Costa were dating.
Oh, there it is.
There it is. Another connection to Tony.
It's just seeming like every woman he comes in contact with goes missing.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy, to be honest. And back when they were dating and people started noticing that she wasn't really around Tony anymore, he had told people and their friends or whoever that she had gone to Mexico for 5 months to travel. Now, after this information has come out, detectives are getting rather suspicious of Mr. Tony Costa, and he ends up getting wind of being connected to the disappearance of Pat, Marianne, and to the death of Susan, his, as we just mentioned, previous girlfriend. So he actually returns to Provincetown to prove his innocence and to give an explanation as to why he was with the two girls that had gone missing initially.
Yeah, like explain that away, Tony.
Yeah. Well, he
Give it your best
initially
shot.
tells detectives that one of the girls, Pat or Marianne, had needed an abortion and that they had wanted to go to Montreal to have it done.
They go to Canada for that, I guess.
That is where Montreal is, yes.
Bev.
But they had told Tony that in the meantime, they would give him
Their car.
exactly.
Oh,
and that is why he just so happened to be driving it around town, you know,
Can you imagine
getting
be
a
like,
paint job.
hey, I need to run to Canada for like a day or two without my car.
Yeah, can you, here, stranger,
Just hold
can
on
you
to
hold
it?
on to my Volkswagen?
I'll contact you when I'm back in the city.
Yeah, I mean, that alone is weird, but the fact that he went to go paint said Volkswagen is odd. And also the
He's
fact that it
lying.
was like parked near where a dead body was found, who just so happened to be one of your ex-girlfriends. I mean,
Concerning.
Tony, this explanation just isn't cutting it. And what also seemed weird to detectives was that as they spoke to Tony, his story kept changing. He had initially said that the girls had given him the vehicle while they were in Montreal, but then he changed it to say that he actually bought the car from the two girls. And even though Tony seemed sketchy, the detectives still didn't have any concrete evidence against him. So unfortunately, they did have to let him go. And before he stepped out of the detective's office, they tell him, if you do happen to speak to the girls, tell them to contact us so we know that they are okay. And ironically, just a month after finding Susan on March 3rd of 1969, a telegram arrives at Tony's mother's house.
No, did it?
It is addressed to Tony, and it's from Pat and Mary Ann. It reads, "What happened? We waited as planned. Is everything all right? We'll meet you as scheduled in New York City. Love, Pat and Mary Ann." And of course, Tony's mother brings it to detectives. Like, the girls have reached out. They're not missing. This
My
proves my
son.
son's innocence.
Yeah, but also how convenient.
It is insanely convenient. And what's even more damning, really, is that detectives find out that the telegram was sent from New York, but it was a number that Tony had access to.
Ooh, you can't pull the wool over their eyes, Tony.
Exactly. So again, he is trying to cover his tracks. And it would seem that detectives are not going to get too much information from Tony, so they decide to put surveillance on him. And during the next bit of their investigation, another woman actually comes forward. And what she told the detectives was that about a month prior, she had gone with Tony to see his weed garden and that he had shot her in the back with an arrow. Luckily, she had escaped with minor injuries, but it's painting a pretty dark picture of Tony's intentions.
Yeah, it's not like it's not every day you shoot someone in the back with an arrow for fun.
That's true. At least not intentionally, right? Like,
nope.
If you're playing around with an arrow and something bad happens, sure, but
whoops, was your back in the way?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like something that could be like an accident. Like he was trying to incapacitate her in some way. No? Seems like it.
Seems like it.
So now we're going to fast forward to March 5th, and the search is continuing in the woodlands. And one detective finds a rope at the base of a tree that's soaked in blood. He recognizes it to be the same one that was found in the room at the boarding house that was found in Tony's room. The detectives felt that this is where they needed to dig. So they start clearing the loose dirt and find a bunch of pill bottles, as well as a bunch of different drug paraphernalia. But what they will find next is truly horrifying. The detective digs deeper into the dirt, and his hand sinks into human flesh. They find a torso and a severed head in a plastic bag. They lightly dust the dirt off the eyes and the mouth of the head, and detectives immediately know that this was the body of Mary Ann Wysocki. As they continued to dig, they found more dismembered pieces of her. The horror continues as the detectives continue their search, and they find a second grave. They found this grave because of the intense scent of decomposition within the area. And when they started digging, they noticed that they have now found the body of Pat Walsh. She was cut in half, and they found the remaining pieces of Mary Ann that they had been missing as well. Now, after they exhumed Pat, they realized that there was something more pungent underneath her body. And what they found was the dismembered body of Sydney Monson. Now, if you remember, this was the first girl that had gone missing in Provincetown. In addition to finding Sydney, Pat, and Mary Ann's bodies, the detectives also found a .22 caliber pistol that was dug up. And this was identified later in the investigation as Tony's. And they believe that this was the murder weapon in all of the murders.
Right.
So clearly they're finding all this information, the bodies, and they know without a shadow of a doubt that Tony was the one who did this.
Oh yeah, with all this circumstantial evidence, how could it not be?
Exactly. So they have to send the bodies off to be autopsied, but in the meantime, they arrest Tony.
Damn straight they do.
And what is so tragic about this case is that when the autopsies come back, the horror that these women went through
unimaginable.
Was unimaginable, yeah. And it was clearly shown by their injuries and in the autopsy report, just some of the things that they did go through. Now, some of those things are that the women had been cut up. Some of their body parts had been skinned. And Pat's torso was even skinned all the way up to her shoulders.
Yeah, the skin was actually, from what I understand, was still attached at the shoulders. So it was just kind of dangling.
Oh my God, that is horrific.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Brutal.
That's disgusting. Oh, Lordy. And the desecration to their bodies continued, Becky. They each had multiple bite marks. Their organs, including their sexual organs, had been cut out. They had been raped post-mortem, so after they had died, and they had all initially been shot. And what's even wilder is that all of the women's hearts were never found. So who knows what was done with those, but they were not with their bodies.
Actually, with the hearts missing, that's why he has the Cannibal of Cape Cod, or the Cape Cod Cannibal.
That's why he's known as that, yeah.
Yeah, because everyone assumes
that he ate them.
Yeah, and there was some skin missing as well from
so maybe
skinning.
He tried it.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's only a rumor, but he still has that savage nickname.
Yeah. And I can see why. Where did they go? Where did they go, Tony? The hearts. Where are they? Right?
Yes. Where are they?
Like, why wouldn't they be with the rest of the body? That's just odd.
Yeah.
So, of course, this case became a media frenzy. And like you said, Tony Costa was given the nickname the Cape Cod Cannibal as well as the Cape Cod vampire, because obviously he took their freaking hearts, right?
Yeah, and bit them.
Yeah, which vampires are known for. So the trial was intense. Everyone and anyone knew about it because it was plastered all over the newspapers. And it was said that he was even more brutal than Jack the Ripper. Tony Costa seemed to soak up every ounce of attention he could get throughout the whole process. He just seemed to love the spotlight. He had actually seemed proud of what he had done, which is just sick and freaking twisted, hey?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Tony professed his innocence through it all. Like, it's so weird. It's like, obviously he's proud of it, and he seems that way, but yet he's still wanting to prove his innocence somehow. It's like he wants to be known for it,
but not committed of the crime.
Yeah, exactly. Super weird. But his profession of innocence kind of went down the drain as his defense attorney admitted that Tony had done this crime, but it was because of the mass amounts of drugs that he was on. So they are trying to get Tony off under the ruse that he was insane via drug use and that he didn't know what he was doing and therefore he couldn't be held criminally responsible for it. And in the trial, Tony wanted to also address the court. He felt he could control the court's perception of him, which is like, just, Becky, that is classic, is it not? Of like serial killers and like...
Sounds a little like Ted Bundy.
Yeah, it's just like they think that they can like charm everyone around them, including a jury, including a prosecution, right? Like,
yes, they can do it.
However, this kind of seemed to be a double-edged sword for him because in his speech, Tony spoke so well and with such intellect that he came across as being very smart, logical, charming, and completely not insane.
Which ended up being his Achilles heel because he wanted to be so smart, show them like, this is why I couldn't have done it, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
but
prove
it
his
backfired
innocence.
like nobody's business because everyone's like, oh, he actually is really smart. He knows right from wrong.
Yeah, he was supposed to be insane.
Yeah, like
this
no
doesn't make
insane
sense.
person would do this good of a job.
Well, exactly, right? And because of this, the jury found Tony guilty on 3 counts of first-degree murder.
Yeah, they thought the same thing.
Yeah, they believe these heinous acts could only have been committed by someone who was completely disturbed, but that ultimately Tony did know right from wrong. They thought that the drugs may have altered his personality and perception a little bit, but didn't mean that he would kill someone, let alone multiple women. So that is ultimately why they found him guilty. Now, on top of being held responsible for killing 4 women, Tony is also believed to be responsible for about 16 other missing or murdered women along the East Coast during the 1960s.
Yeah, these women have been noted to have seen him or been with him and then disappeared after. So a lot of their bodies have not been found. And it's really sad.
That is seriously sad. That's a lot of women to have gone missing after having direct contact with him, hey?
Yes.
So, of course, this is why a lot of people believe that he was responsible for those deaths. But unfortunately, Tony has never admitted to just how many women he did slaughter. Now, obviously, justice was served in the 4 deaths of the missing women in this case. However, it wasn't for very long because only a couple of years into Tony's sentence, on May 12th of 1974, he was found hanging in his cell at the age of 29. Now, it was believed at the time that he had ended his own life, but many people believe that he was murdered for what he had done. And I wouldn't be surprised because it was pretty gruesome and maybe people are like, we don't want that around. I don't know. But I also believe that doing such heinous and disturbing things to other humans like eats away at you. And I think it would be hard to live with yourself after that.
I totally agree.
Especially while you're in prison. It's not like you're out and about, doing this to women over and over again anymore, which I think would give a serial killer a thrill.
Yeah.
Now you're just in prison kind of like
sitting there thinking about
with your own thoughts. I think it would eat away at you.
Oh, for sure.
So, Becky, this is the case of Sydney Monzon, Susan Perry, Patricia Walsh, and Marianne Wysocki. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for sharing.